The Bible is filled with stories of amazing women. Today we would hear the stories of some of them. Welcome. If you are new, subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. Thanks. Sarah. A journey of faith and fulfillment. In the vast, arid expanse of Canaan, where the desert wind swept across the barren plains, a nomadic tribe moved with the rhythm of the seasons. At the heart of this tribe was an aging man named Abram, a man chosen by God for a divine purpose. Among the tents, a woman named Sarai went about her daily tasks. Her face, though weathered by years of toil under the relentless sun, bore an elegance that defied her age. Sarai was no ordinary woman. She was the beloved wife of Abram, a woman of strength and resilience, chosen by God for a destiny that was yet to unfold. Years earlier, God had called Abram from his homeland, Ur of the Chaldeans, with a command and a promise that would shape the course of history. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. Abram obeyed, stepping out in faith, and Sarai followed, leaving behind everything familiar. Together, they embarked on a journey, trusting in a God whose plans were grand, but whose timing was unknown. Their lives were now intertwined with a promise that would echo through the ages. Sarai was a woman of faith, but she was also human. While Abram clung to the promise of becoming a great nation, Sarai could not ignore the obvious reality she was barren. Years of marriage had yielded no child, and the whispers of her inadequacy often felt louder than the voice of God. How could Abram become the father of many nations if she could not give him even one child? The weight of this unfulfilled promise rested heavily on her heart, a constant reminder of her perceived failure. One evening, as the stars pierced the dark sky above, Abram sat by the fire, deep in thought. Sarai watched him from a distance, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. The next day, Abram shared with her the words God had spoken to him. No longer will you be called Abram, your name will be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. As for Sarai, her name will be Sarah, for I will bless her and will surely give you a son by her. She will be the mother of nations, kings of peoples will come from her. Sarah. The name felt strange on her lips at first, but it carried a weight of destiny. She wanted to believe, but how could she? She was nearly 90 years old. Her body had long passed the age of bearing children. Yet Abraham believed, and she loved him enough to hope that maybe, just maybe, the impossible could happen. Despite the promise, years continued to pass without any sign of a child. Sarah wrestled with doubts that gnawed at her faith. Perhaps God's promise needed a little help. If she couldn't bear a child herself, perhaps another woman could. In a moment of desperation, she devised a plan. Take my maidservant Hagar, she told Abraham one day. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abraham hesitated, but eventually agreed. Hagar, Sarah's Egyptian maidservant, became pregnant. At first, Sarah thought this plan might bring her peace, but instead it brought division and heartache. Hagar's pregnancy made her haughty, and Sarah's jealousy consumed her. The very plan she had devised turned into a source of pain. One day, unable to bear the tension, Sarah mistreated Hagar so severely that the maidservant fled into the wilderness. Yet even in this, God intervened, commanding Hagar to return and promising that her son, Ishmael, would also become the father of a great nation. Still, Sarah couldn't escape the ache of barrenness. One ordinary afternoon, as Sarah prepared bread inside her tent, she overheard voices outside. Abraham had received 3 visitors, and though they appeared as men, there was something extraordinary about them. Abraham hurried to show them hospitality, providing water, food, and a place to rest. As Sarah worked, she listened intently. One of the visitors asked Abraham, "Where is your wife Sarah?" "In the tent," Abraham replied. Then the visitor said something that made Sarah's heart stop. "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son." From behind the tent's fabric, Sarah laughed silently to herself. The idea was absurd. Her body was frail, her womb long barren. How could she, a woman of nearly 90, bear a child? Yet the visitor's words were not just a statement, they were a proclamation of God's power and faithfulness. "Why did Sarah laugh?" the visitor asked. "Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Fear gripped Sarah. She denied laughing, but the visitor, who was none other than the Lord, knew the truth. His words lingered in her mind long after the visitors had gone. Was anything too hard for the Lord? Months passed, and something miraculous happened. Sarah's body began to change. At first, she dismissed it as a figment of her imagination, but soon there was no denying it. She was pregnant. The laughter that had once been filled with doubt now became laughter of joy and amazement. God's promise was coming true. At the appointed time, Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac, which means he laughs, a testament to both her earlier disbelief and the overwhelming joy of fulfillment. As Sarah held her baby for the first time, tears streamed down her face. "God has brought me laughter," she said, "and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age." The years that followed were filled with the joys and challenges of raising Isaac. He was the child of promise, the one through whom God's covenant would continue. Sarah's heart was full, but she was not without trials. One day she saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, mocking Isaac. Protective of her son and the promise he represented, Sarah demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Though it pained Abraham, God reassured him that Ishmael would also be blessed, but that Isaac was the child of the covenant. With a heavy heart, Abraham obeyed, and Hagar and Ishmael left. Sarah's actions might seem harsh, but her fierce loyalty to God's promise and her son drove her decisions. Sarah lived to see Isaac grow into a young man. Her life, marked by decades of waiting and moments of doubt, became a testament to God's faithfulness. She had laughed in disbelief, yet God had turned her laughter into joy. She had doubted, yet God had proven that nothing was too hard for him. When Sarah died at the age of 127, she was buried in the cave of Machpelah, a burial site Abraham purchased. Her story didn't end with her death. Her legacy continued through Isaac, Jacob, and the generations that followed. she became the matriarch of a nation as countless as the stars. Sarah's life is a mirror for anyone who has struggled with waiting, doubted God's promises, or felt inadequate. Her journey reminds us that God's timing is perfect, His promises are sure, and His power is limitless. Sarah's laughter of doubt transformed into laughter of joy because she dared to believe in the God who makes the impossible possible. In Sarah, we see the beauty of faith refined by trials, the strength of a woman who played a pivotal role in God's plan, and the assurance that no matter how long it takes, God's promises never fail. Sarah's story is one of faith and fulfillment, a testament to the power of God's grace and the resilience of the human spirit. Her life was a journey marked by waiting, doubt, and ultimately joy. She was a woman who faced the impossible and found that with God, nothing is impossible. As we reflect on Sarah's story, we are reminded of the importance of faith, the power of God's promises, and the beauty of a life lived in trust. Sarah's journey teaches us that even in the face of doubt and uncertainty, God is faithful. Her story is a beacon of hope for all who struggle with waiting or feel overwhelmed by the challenges of life. In the end, Sarah's laughter of joy echoes through the ages, a reminder that God's promises are true and that His plans for us are good. Her legacy is one of faith, hope, and the enduring love of God. The search for a wife. Rebecca's journey of faith and destiny. The story of Rebecca begins in the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, a journey that would intertwine her life with the divine plan God had for Abraham's family. After the death of Sarah, the matriarch of the family, and as Isaac grew older, Abraham became deeply concerned about finding a suitable wife for his son. Abraham understood that God's covenant to make his descendants into a great nation hinged not only on Isaac, but also on the choice of a faithful and godly partner. However, Abraham was resolute in his decision that Isaac should not marry a Canaanite woman. Instead, he desired someone from his own people, someone who would understand and honor the sacred covenant promises of God. To accomplish this, Abraham summoned his most trusted servant, likely Eliezer, and entrusted him with a mission of great importance. This servant was tasked with traveling back to Abraham's homeland in Mesopotamia, a journey that was both daunting and filled with uncertainty. Yet, it was a mission bathed in prayer and an unwavering trust in God's guidance. As the servant prepared to embark on his journey, he prayed, "Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham." His prayer was not a mere formality, it was a heartfelt plea for divine intervention. He asked God for a sign, a clear indication of his choice for Isaac's wife. The servant prayed that the woman who offered him and his camels water at the well would be the one God had chosen. The servant's journey led him to the town of Nahor, where he arrived in the evening, the time when women traditionally came to draw water from the wells. As he approached the well, he paused and prayed again, seeking God's clarity and guidance. His prayer was earnest and filled with anticipation. Before he had even finished praying, Rebecca appeared. She was described as very beautiful, and she carried a jar on her shoulder. The servant approached her and asked for a drink of water. Rebecca not only gave him water, but also offered to draw water for his camelsa task that required great effort, as camels drink a significant amount of water. This act of kindness and generosity was the sign the servant had prayed for. It confirmed to him that Rebekah was the one God had chosen. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the servant bowed down and worshipped God, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master." The servant's heart was filled with awe and thanksgiving. He knew that God had guided him to the right place and the right person. Rebekah's family welcomed the servant into their home, and he recounted his mission, explaining how God had answered his prayer. Laban, Rebekah's brother, and Bethuel, her father, recognized God's hand in the matter and agreed to the proposal. When the time came for Rebekah to leave her family and journey to a foreign land to marry Isaac, she displayed remarkable faith and courage. When asked if she would go with the servant, her response was simple yet profound. "I will go." Rebekah's willingness to obey and trust in God's plan is a testament to her character. She was leaving behind everything familiar, her family, her home, and her way of life to step into an unknown future. Yet, she trusted that God's hand was guiding her, and her faith was unwavering. As Rebekah approached her new home, Isaac was in the fields, meditating. When he saw the caravan approaching, he went to meet them. Rebekah, upon seeing Isaac, covered herself with a veil, a sign of modesty and respect. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and the two were married. The Bible says he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. This union was not just a marriage, it was the continuation of God's covenant promises to Abraham's family. It was a new beginning, filled with hope and the promise of a future. Rebekah's life, however, was not without challenges. Like her mother-in-law Sarah, Rebekah struggled with infertility. For 20 years, she and Isaac waited and prayed for children. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife, and God answered their prayers. Rebekah conceived twins, but her pregnancy was difficult. The children jostled within her, causing her great discomfort. Confused and distressed, Rebekah sought the Lord, asking why this was happening. God revealed to her that she was carrying two nations within her, and that the older would serve the younger. This prophecy would shape the course of her family's story and reveal the complexities of God's plan. Hagar, the woman seen by God. The story of Hagar, the Egyptian servant, begins in the household of Abraham and Sarah. Hagar's name is not introduced with grandeur or acclaim, but as a servant, an outsider in the story of God's covenant with Abraham. Yet her life becomes a testament to God's care, not just for the central figures of the Bible, but also for the marginalized, the overlooked, and the brokenhearted. Hagar likely came into Abraham and Sarah's household during their time in Egypt, when a famine forced them to leave Canaan temporarily. As an Egyptian, she was far from home, living in a foreign land and serving as Sarah's maidservant. Her role was one of obedience and subservience, yet her story would become interwoven with divine encounters that revealed the depth of God's love and provision. Sarah, barren and growing older, carried the weight of God's promise to Abraham that he would become the father of many nations. Year after year passed without a child, and her hope began to wane. Desperation clouded her judgment, and she devised a culturally acceptable but spiritually flawed solution. She offered Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate, hoping to build a family through her. Hagar, likely having little say in the matter, found herself thrust into a situation she did not choose. She became pregnant with Abraham's child, a development that should have brought joy to the household. Instead, it sowed seeds of discord. The power dynamics between Hagar and Sarah shifted. For the first time, Hagar held something Sarah did not a child. This shift brought tension and animosity between the two women. Hagar's pregnancy gave her a sense of significance, but it also led to pride. She began to despise Sarah, perhaps flaunting her ability to conceive where Sarah could not. Sarah in turn grew increasingly jealous and bitter. The relationship between the two women deteriorated quickly, and Sarah went to Abraham, laying the blame on him. Asterisk. You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. Asterisk, she said. Asterisk. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Asterisk. Caught in the middle, Abraham gave Sarah permission to deal with Hagar as she saw fit. Sarah's mistreatment of Hagar became so severe that Hagar fled into the wilderness, seeking escape from the harshness of her circumstances. It was in the desolation of the wilderness, alone and vulnerable, that Hagar experienced one of the most profound moments of her life. By a spring of water, the angel of the Lord appeared to her, addressing her by name. Asterisk. Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? Asterisk. The question pierced through her fear and despair. Hagar responded honestly, Asterisk. I am running away from my mistress Sarai. Asterisk. The angel, however, did not offer her an easy way out. Instead, he gave her a challenging instruction. Asterisk. Go back to your mistress and submit to her. Asterisk. Though this command must have been difficult to hear, the angel also brought a promise that transformed Hagar's perspective. Asterisk. I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. Asterisk. The angel continued, revealing the destiny of her unborn son. Asterisk. You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. Asterisk. In the ancient lands of Canaan, where the sun beat down relentlessly and the desert winds whispered secrets of old, the household of Abraham and Sarah was a place of both promise and tension. Among the bustling activity of this nomadic family, an Egyptian servant named Hagar moved quietly, her presence often overlooked. Yet, her story would become one of the most profound and enduring narratives of divine encounter and personal resilience. Hagar's story begins not with a grand introduction, but as a servant in the household of Abraham and Sarah. Her life was one of obedience and subservience. Far from the grandeur of the covenant promises that God had made to Abraham. Hagar likely came into their household during their time in Egypt, when a severe famine forced them to leave Canaan temporarily. As an Egyptian, she was far from her homeland, living in a foreign land and serving Sarah, the wife of a man chosen by God, for a divine purpose. Hagar's role was one of service, but her life would soon become intertwined with the divine in ways she could never have imagined. Her story is a testament to God's care, not just for the central figures of the Bible, but also for the marginalized, the overlooked, and the broken-hearted. Hagar likely came into Abraham and Sarah's household during their time in Egypt, when a famine forced them to leave Canaan temporarily. As an Egyptian, she was far from home, living in a foreign land and serving as Sarah's maidservant. Her role was one of obedience and subservience, yet her story would become interwoven with divine encounters that revealed the depth of God's love and provision. Sarah, barren and growing older, carried the weight of God's promise to Abraham that he would become the father of many nations. Year after year passed without a child, and her hope began to wane. Desperation clouded her judgment, and she devised a planner, culturally acceptable but spiritually flawed solution. She offered Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate, hoping to build a family through her. Hagar, likely having little say in the matter, found herself thrust into a situation she did not choose. She became pregnant with Abraham's child, a development that should have brought joy to the household. Instead, it sowed seeds of discord. The power dynamics between Hagar and Sarah shifted. For the first time, Hagar held something Sarah did note a child. This shift brought tension and animosity between the two women. Hagar's pregnancy gave her a sense of significance, but it also led to pride. She began to despise Sarah, perhaps flaunting her ability to conceive where Sarah could not. Sarah in turn grew increasingly jealous and bitter. The relationship between the two women deteriorated quickly, and Sarah went to Abraham, laying the blame on him. "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering," she said. "I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." Caught in the middle, Abraham gave Sarah permission to deal with Hagar as she saw fit. Sarah's mistreatment of Hagar became so severe that Hagar fled into the wilderness, seeking escape from the harshness of her circumstances. It was in the desolation of the wilderness, alone and vulnerable, that Hagar experienced one of the most profound moments of her life. By a spring of water, the angel of the Lord appeared to her, addressing her by name. "Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going?" The question pierced through her fear and despair. Hagar responded honestly, "I am running away from my mistress Sarai." The angel, however, did not offer her an easy way out. Instead, he gave her a challenging instruction: "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." Though this command must have been difficult to hear, the angel also brought a promise that transformed Hagar's perspective. "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." The angel continued, revealing the destiny of her unborn son. "You are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." Hagar's heart must have been overwhelmed with a mixture of emotions, relief, awe, and perhaps even fear of the unknown. But more than anything, she felt seen. In her loneliness and suffering, God had found her, spoken to her, and given her hope. She called the Lord by a new name. "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." Strengthened by this encounter, Hagar returned to Sarah and Abraham, carrying not just her child, but also the promise of God's provision and care. Hagar gave birth to a son, and Abraham named him Ishmael, meaning God hears. For a time, the household seemed to settle into a new normal. Ishmael grew up under Abraham's care, and Hagar likely found some sense of stability, even if her relationship with Sarah remained strained. But the promise of God was still unfolding, and Sarah's story was far from over. Years later, the miraculous happened. Sarah gave birth to Isaac, the child of promise. The joy of Isaac's arrival, however, brought new challenges for Hagar and Ishmael. Sarah's protective instincts over Isaac grew stronger, and she became increasingly uneasy about Ishmael's presence. During a feast celebrating Isaac's weaning, Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac. The sight was the final straw. She went to Abraham and demanded, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham was deeply distressed, as Ishmael was his son. But God reassured him, saying, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." Though it pained him, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael away with provisions. Once again, Hagar found herself wandering in the wilderness, this time with her teenage son. As the water Abraham had given them ran out, Hagar's despair reached its peak. She placed Ishmael under a bush, unable to watch him die, and sat a distance away, weeping. But God was not finished with Hagar and Ishmael. "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. In that moment, Hagar's hope was restored. Ishmael grew up in the desert, becoming an archer. God was with him, just as he had promised. Hagar found a wife for him in Egypt, and he became the father of a great nation, fulfilling God's word. Hagar's story is one of resilience, faith, and divine provision. Though she was an outsider, a servant, and a woman of little status, God saw her, spoke to her, and cared for her. Her encounters with the divine remind us that God's love extends to all, regardless of social standing or circumstances. Hagar's legacy lives on through Ishmael, the father of many nations. Her story is a powerful testament to the truth that no one is forgotten by God. In our moments of deepest despair, we too can call upon the God who sees us and trust in his provision. The search for a wife. Rebecca's journey of faith and destiny. The story of Rebecca begins in the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, a journey that would intertwine her life with the divine plan God had for Abraham's family. After the death of Sarah, the matriarch of the family, and as Isaac grew older, Abraham became deeply concerned about finding a suitable wife for his son. Abraham understood that God's covenant to make his descendants into a great nation hinged not only on Isaac, but also on the choice of a faithful and godly partner. However, Abraham was resolute in his decision that Isaac should not marry a Canaanite woman. Instead, he desired someone from his own people, someone who would understand and honor the sacred covenant promises of God. To accomplish this, Abraham summoned his most trusted servant, likely Eliezer, and entrusted him with a mission of great importance. This servant was tasked with traveling back to Abraham's homeland in Mesopotamia, a journey that was both daunting and filled with uncertainty. Yet, it was a mission bathed in prayer and an unwavering trust in God's guidance. As the servant prepared to embark on his journey, he prayed, "Lord, God of my master Abraham, make me successful today and show kindness to my master Abraham." His prayer was not a mere formality, it was a heartfelt plea for divine intervention. He asked God for a sign, a clear indication of his choice for Isaac's wife. The servant prayed that the woman who offered him and his camels water at the well would be the one God had chosen. The servant's journey led him to the town of Nahor, where he arrived in the evening, the time when women traditionally came to draw water from the wells. As he approached the well, he paused and prayed again, seeking God's clarity and guidance. His prayer was earnest and filled with anticipation. Before he had even finished praying, Rebecca appeared. She was described as very beautiful, and she carried a jar on her shoulder. The servant approached her and asked for a drink of water. Rebecca not only gave him water, but also offered to draw water for his camelsa task that required great effort, as camels drink a significant amount of water. This act of kindness and generosity was the sign the servant had prayed for. It confirmed to him that Rebecca was the one God had chosen. Overwhelmed with gratitude, the servant bowed down and worshipped God, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not abandoned his kindness and faithfulness to my master." The servant's heart was filled with awe and thanksgiving. He knew that God had guided him to the right place and the right person. Rebecca's family welcomed the servant into their home, and he recounted his mission, explaining how God had answered his prayer. Laban, Rebecca's brother, and Bethuel, her father, recognized God's hand in the matter and agreed to the proposal. When the time came for Rebecca to leave her family and journey to a foreign land to marry Isaac, she displayed remarkable faith and courage. When asked if she would go with the servant, her response was simple yet profound. "I will go." Rebecca's willingness to obey and trust in God's plan is a testament to her character. She was leaving behind everything familiar, her family, her home, and her way of life to step into an unknown future. Yet, she trusted that God's hand was guiding her, and her faith was unwavering. As Rebecca approached her new home, Isaac was in the fields, meditating. When he saw the caravan approaching, he went to meet them. Rebecca, upon seeing Isaac, covered herself with a veil, a sign of modesty and respect. Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and the two were married. The Bible says he loved her, and Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. This union was not just a marriage, it was the continuation of God's covenant promises to Abraham's family. It was a new beginning, filled with hope and the promise of a future. Rebecca's life, however, was not without challenges. Like her mother-in-law Sarah, Rebekah struggled with infertility. For 20 years, she and Isaac waited and prayed for children. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife, and God answered their prayers. Rebekah conceived twins, but her pregnancy was difficult. The children jostled within her, causing her great discomfort. Confused and distressed, Rebekah sought the Lord, asking why this was happening. God revealed to her that she was carrying two nations within her, and that the older would serve the younger. This prophecy would shape the course of her family's story and reveal the complexities of God's plan. Rebekah gave birth to twin boys Esau, the firstborn, and Jacob, the younger. Esau grew up to be a skilled hunter, a man of the fields, while Jacob was quiet and preferred staying at home. Isaac favored Esau because of his hunting skills, but Rebekah loved Jacob. This favoritism set the stage for conflict within the family. Rebekah's love for Jacob was not merely a matter of preference. She remembered God's prophecy that the older would serve the younger. When the time came for Isaac to bestow his blessing, an act of great significance in the ancient world, Rebekah took decisive action to ensure that Jacob received the blessing instead of Esau. Isaac, now old and nearly blind, called Esau and instructed him to prepare a meal so that he could bless him. Overhearing this, Rebekah devised a plan to secure the blessing for Jacob. She instructed Jacob to bring her 2 young goats so she could prepare a meal for Isaac. She then dressed Jacob in Esau's clothes and covered his hands and neck with goat skins to mimic Esau's hairy skin. Jacob hesitated, fearing that his father would discover the deception and curse him instead of blessing him. But Rebekah reassured him, saying, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say." Rebekah's actions were bold and controversial. She was driven by her understanding of God's prophecy and her determination to see it fulfilled. Her plan succeeded, and Isaac unknowingly blessed Jacob, bestowing upon him the promises of God's covenant. When Esau discovered what had happened, he was furious and vowed to kill Jacob. Fearing for Jacob's life, Rebekah urged him to flee to her brother Laban's house in Haran. She told Isaac that she was sending Jacob away to find a wife from her own people, a decision that Isaac supported. Rebekah's role in this story is both pivotal and complex. Her actions ensured that God's covenant promises were fulfilled through Jacob, yet they also led to division and heartache within her family. The Bible does not record any further interactions between Rebekah and Jacob, leaving readers to wonder about the personal cost of her decisions. Rebekah's story is one of faith, courage, and determination. She trusted God's plan and was willing to take bold steps to see it fulfilled. Her life reminds us that God often works through flawed and imperfect people to accomplish His purposes. Rebekah's legacy lives on through Jacob, who became the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Her faith and actions, though complicated, played a crucial role in the unfolding of God's covenant promises. Rebekah's journey is a powerful reminder of the complexities of faith and the challenges of following God's plan. Her story teaches us that God works through the choices and actions of individuals, even when those choices are difficult and fraught with tension. In Rebekah, we see a woman who was willing to trust in God's promises and take bold actions to ensure their fulfillment. Her story is a testament to the power of faith and the importance of obedience. It also highlights the struggles and sacrifices that often accompany a life of faith. Rebecca's legacy is one of both triumph and complexity. Her actions were instrumental in the fulfillment of God's covenant, yet they also led to family conflict and heartache. Her story challenges us to consider the ways in which our choices can impact not only our own lives but also the lives of those around us. As we reflect on Rebecca's story, we are reminded of the importance of trusting in God's plan even when it requires difficult choices and sacrifices. Her story inspires us to have faith in God's promises and to trust that He is working in our lives, even when we cannot see the full picture. In the end, Rebecca's story is a powerful reminder of the enduring love of God and the hope that comes from knowing that He is guiding our steps. Her legacy lives on through the generations that followed, a testament to the power of faith and the fulfillment of God's promises. Leah and Rachel. Sisters, rivals, and matriarchs of Israel, the story of Leah and Rachel, as told in the book of Genesis, is a rich tapestry of love, rivalry, heartbreak, and the enduring faithfulness of God. It is a narrative that delves into the complexities of human relationships, the struggles of family dynamics, and the mysterious ways in which God works through flawed and imperfect people to fulfill His divine promises. Through the lives of these two sisters, the 12 tribes of Israel were born, laying the foundation for God's chosen people and shaping the course of history. The story begins with Jacob, a man on the run. After deceiving his father, Isaac, and tricking him into giving him the blessing that was meant for his older brother Esau, Jacob fled his homeland to escape Esau's wrath. His journey led him to Haran, the homeland of his mother Rebekah, where he sought refuge with his uncle Laban. It was a journey filled with uncertainty, but also with the hope of finding a wife among his relatives, as was the custom of the time. As Jacob approached the town of Haran, he came upon a well where shepherds were gathering with their flocks. Among them was a beautiful young woman named Rachel, the daughter of his uncle Laban. The Bible describes Rachel as lovely in form and beautiful, Genesis 29-17. Jacob was immediately infatuated with her. In a display of both his strength and his affection, Jacob rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered Rachel's sheep. Rachel in turn brought Jacob to her father Laban. Jacob was welcomed into their home and he stayed with the family. Over time, his initial infatuation with Rachel blossomed into deep love. Jacob made a bold proposal to Laban. He would work for him for 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage. Laban agreed, and Jacob served him faithfully, his love for Rachel making the years feel like mere days. At the end of the 7 years, Jacob eagerly anticipated his marriage to Rachel. However, on the wedding night, Laban deceived Jacob by giving him Leah, Rachel's older sister, instead. Leah was described as having weak eyes, Genesis 29-17, a phrase that contrasts with Rachel's beauty and may suggest that Leah was less attractive or less confident. Jacob did not realize the deception until the morning after the wedding. Furious, he confronted Laban, who justified his actions by explaining that it was customary to marry off the older daughter before the younger. Laban then offered Rachel to Jacob as well on the condition that Jacob work for him another 7 years. Jacob, desperate to have Rachel as his wife, agreed to the terms. Just 1 week after marrying Leah, he married Rachel as well. This arrangement set the stage for a complex and emotionally charged family dynamic. Jacob now had 2 wives, but his heart belonged to Rachel, leaving Leah in a painful and unfulfilled position. Though Jacob loved Rachel deeply, he did not feel the same affection for Leah. This disparity created immense pain for Leah, who longed for her husband's love and attention. Leah's heart ached with the knowledge that she was not the wife Jacob desired. Yet in her suffering, God saw her and showed her compassion. Leah's first son, Reuben, was born, and she named him as a testament to God's awareness of her misery. It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. Genesis 29-32. She hoped that bearing children would win Jacob's love, but her pain persisted. Leah went on to have 3 more sons, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Each name reflected her emotions and her relationship with God. The birth of Judah, whose name means praise, marked a turning point in Leah's perspective. She chose to focus on praising God rather than seeking Jacob's affection, finding solace and strength in her faith. While Leah bore Jacob multiple children, Rachel struggled with infertility, a source of deep anguish in a culture where a woman's worth was often tied to her ability to bear children. Rachel envied her sister and cried out to Jacob in frustration, "Give me children or I'll die." Genesis 30-1. Jacob, feeling powerless, reminded her that only God could grant her the desire of her heart. In her desperation, Rachel gave her servant Bilhah to Jacob as a surrogate. Through Bilhah, Rachel claimed 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. These names reflected Rachel's feelings of vindication and struggle as she competed with her sister for Jacob's affection and for a place of honor in the family. Not to be outdone, Leah also gave her servant Zilpah to Jacob, resulting in 2 more sons, Gad and Asher. The rivalry between the sisters escalated as they vied for Jacob's favor and sought to build their families. The competition was fierce and the tension between the sisters was palpable. The tension between Leah and Rachel is highlighted in the story of the mandrakes. Reuben, Leah's eldest son, found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother. In ancient times, mandrakes were believed to enhance fertility, making them highly desirable to Rachel. She asked Leah for some of the mandrakes, but Leah, feeling slighted by Rachel's favored position, responded bitterly, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too?" Genesis 30-15. Rachel struck a bargain with Leah, allowing her to spend the night with Jacob in exchange for the mandrakes. That night, Leah conceived another son, Issachar, followed by another, Zebulun. She later gave birth to a daughter, Dinah. The mandrake incident was a poignant reminder of the sisters' rivalry and the lengths to which they would go to gain favor and bear children. After years of waiting and heartache, God finally remembered Rachel and opened her womb. She gave birth to a son, Joseph, whose name reflected her hope for even more children. "May the Lord add to me another son," Genesis 30-24. Joseph would later play a pivotal role in the history of Israel, but Rachel's joy was not yet complete. Sometime later, as the family journeyed back to Canaan, Rachel became pregnant again. Tragically, her second pregnancy ended in her death as she gave birth to Benjamin. With her dying breath, Rachel named her son Benoni, meaning son of my sorrow. But Jacob renamed him Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand. Rachel was buried near Bethlehem, and her grave became a landmark remembered for generations. Despite their rivalry and the challenges they faced, Leah and Rachel played a critical role in God's redemptive plan. Between them and their servants, they bore the 12 sons who became the patriarchs of the 12 tribes of Israel. These tribes formed the foundation of the nation of Israel, fulfilling God's covenant promise to Abraham. Leah, though unloved by Jacob, found her worth in God. Her son Judah became the ancestor of King David and ultimately Jesus Christ. Rachel, though she experienced much sorrow, was remembered for her beauty and the love Jacob had for her. Her son Joseph would rise to a position of power in Egypt, saving his family during a time of famine. The story of Leah and Rachel teaches us profound lessons about God's sovereignty, grace, and ability to work through human imperfection. God sees and cares for the overlooked. Leah's story reminds us that God values and blesses those who feel unloved or overlooked. He saw her pain and honored her with the role of matriarch to many of Israel's tribes. God's timing is perfect. Rachel's struggle with infertility shows us the importance of trusting in God's timing. Though her journey was difficult, her sons played critical roles in the unfolding of God's plan. God works through brokenness. The rivalry and dysfunction in Jacob's family demonstrate that God can use even flawed relationships to accomplish his purposes. The tribes of Israel were born out of a family marked by jealousy and strife, yet God's covenant promises were fulfilled. Faith in God's promises. Leah and Rachel's lives point us to the importance of faith even when circumstances seem difficult. Their stories remind us that God's promises are sure and his plans are always good. The story of Leah and Rachel is a powerful testament to the complexities of human relationships and the faithfulness of God. It is a narrative that reveals the depth of God's love and the ways in which he works through the imperfections of his people to fulfill his divine plan. Through their lives, we see the beauty of God's grace and the power of his promises. Their story continues to inspire and challenge us to trust in God's faithfulness even when our circumstances seem uncertain or difficult. Miriam, the sister, the prophetess, and the song of deliverance. Miriam, the sister of Moses and Aaron, is one of the most remarkable women in the Bible. Her story is intricately woven into the history of Israel's deliverance from slavery in Egypt and their journey to the Promised Land. Miriam was not merely a passive observer in this epic saga. She was an active participant, a leader, and a prophetess who played a crucial role in the unfolding of God's plan. Her life was marked by moments of great courage, profound worship, and challenging lessons about pride and humility. Through her story, we see a God who uses imperfect people to accomplish his divine purposes. Miriam first steps into the biblical narrative as a young girl during a perilous time for her family and her people. The Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, and Pharaoh, fearing their growing numbers, had decreed that every male Hebrew child be drowned in the Nile River. This was a time of great fear and uncertainty, a time when hope seemed distant and the future uncertain. Amid this terrifying edict, Miriam's family acted in faith. Her mother, Jochebed, gave birth to a baby boy Moses and hid him for 3 months. The love and desperation of a mother to protect her child were evident in Jochebed's actions. But as the child grew, it became impossible to keep him hidden. Jochebed, with a heavy heart, made a decision that would change the course of history. She coated a basket with tar and pitch, placed her baby inside, and set him adrift on the Nile River. Miriam, likely a young teenager at the time, showed incredible courage and resourcefulness. She stood at a distance, watching over her baby brother as he floated among the reeds. Her heart must have been filled with fear and hope, knowing that her brother's life depended on her vigilance. Her watchful eyes did not waver, and her patience was rewarded when Pharaoh's daughter discovered the basket and took pity on the crying infant. Seizing the moment, Miriam approached Pharaoh's daughter with boldness and suggested, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Exodus 2-7. Her words were not just a question, they were a strategic move to ensure Moses' survival. When Pharaoh's daughter agreed, Miriam brought her own mother, Jochebed, to care for Moses. In this way, Miriam played a critical role in ensuring Moses' survival, a pivotal moment in God's plan to deliver Israel from Egypt. Miriam's actions were not merely those of a concerned sister, they were the actions of a young woman who understood the gravity of the situation and the importance of her role. Her courage and quick thinking were instrumental in preserving the life of the man who would later lead Israel out of slavery. Years later, after God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Miriam emerged as a leader in her own right. The Exodus was a time of great triumph and celebration, a time when God's power and faithfulness were on full display. After the miraculous crossing of the Red Sea, where God parted the waters for Israel and drowned Pharaoh's pursuing army, Miriam led the people in a triumphant song of praise. The Bible describes her as a prophetess, a title given to women who spoke under divine inspiration. In Exodus 15:20-21, we see her leading the women of Israel with timbrels and dancing. "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea." This moment captures Miriam's heart for worship and her role in uniting the people to glorify God. She celebrated not just the victory over Pharaoh, but also the power and faithfulness of God, who had kept his promises to his people. Her song was a powerful expression of gratitude and awe, a reminder that God is worthy of praise in both the good times and the bad. Miriam's leadership in worship was not just a spontaneous act, it was a reflection of her deep faith and her understanding of the importance of praising God. Her song was a call to the people to remember what God had done and to trust in his continued provision and protection. While Miriam's story is marked by faith and leadership, it also includes a sobering lesson about pride and its consequences. In Numbers 12, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses, criticizing him for marrying a Cushite woman. Their criticism was not just about his marriage, it was a manifestation of deeper issues of jealousy and discontent. Miriam and Aaron questioned Moses' unique position as God's chosen leader, saying, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us?" Numbers 12-2. Their words revealed a desire for greater recognition and a lack of humility, They had forgotten that their roles were part of God's plan and that their gifts were meant to serve His purposes, not their own ambitions. God heard their grumbling and summoned all 3 siblings to the tent of meeting. There He defended Moses, declaring that he was unlike any other prophet because he spoke with God face to face. As a consequence of her actions, Miriam was struck with leprosy, a visible sign of her rebellion. Aaron, recognizing their wrongdoing, pleaded with Moses to intercede for her. Moses, showing great humility, cried out to God, "Please, God, heal her." Numbers 12:13. God showed mercy, but Miriam was required to stay outside the camp for 7 days, a period of public humiliation and isolation. This incident reminds us that even the most faithful leaders are susceptible to sin and pride. Miriam's punishment, though severe, was also a testament to God's justice and mercy. He disciplined her as a loving father disciplines his children, ultimately restoring her to her place among the people. Miriam's story ends with a brief mention of her death in Numbers 20-1. Miriam died and was buried there. Her passing is recorded without much detail, but her impact on Israel's history is undeniable. She was a woman of courage, stepping forward to protect her brother Moses, and in doing so, playing a part in God's plan to deliver His people. She was a prophetess and worship leader, uniting Israel in praise and pointing them toward the greatness of God. Even in her moment of failure, she served as a reminder of God's holiness and the need for humility in leadership. Miriam's life is a rich tapestry of lessons that continue to resonate with us today. Courage and initiative. Miriam's boldness as a young girl shows the importance of stepping forward in faith, even in difficult circumstances. Her quick thinking saved Moses, setting the stage for Israel's deliverance. The power of worship. Miriam's leadership in worship demonstrates the importance of praising God for His victories. Her song after the Red Sea crossing inspires us to celebrate God's faithfulness and power in our own lives. The danger of pride. Miriam's criticism of Moses reminds us to guard our hearts against jealousy and discontent. God calls us to serve Him with humility, recognizing that our gifts and roles are part of His greater plan. God's mercy in discipline. While Miriam faced consequences for her actions, God's mercy was evident in her restoration. Her story reminds us that God disciplines those He loves and that His forgiveness is always available to those who repent. Conclusion. Miriam's role in God's plan was significant and multifaceted. She was more than just the sister of Moses and Aaron. She was a leader, a prophetess, and a vital part of Israel's journey to freedom. Her life reminds us that God uses ordinary people, flawed and imperfect, to accomplish extraordinary things. Through her story, we see a God who values courage, celebrates worship, disciplines with love, and ultimately fulfills His promises. Miriam's legacy continues to inspire believers to trust in God's faithfulness, lead with humility, and lift their voices in praise to the one who delivers and redeems. Her story is a powerful reminder that God is always at work, using the lives of His people to bring about His divine plan. Deborah's story is one of the most inspiring accounts in the Bible, a narrative that showcases a woman of extraordinary wisdom, unwavering faith, and remarkable courage. In a time when Israel was oppressed and leaderless, Deborah emerged as a beacon of hope and strength, rising as a prophetess and the only female judge recorded in the Bible. Her story, found in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5, is a powerful testament to God's ability to work through anyone He chooses, regardless of gender or societal norms. It highlights the profound impact of faith and obedience in the face of overwhelming odds and serves as a timeless example of leadership and divine intervention. Deborah lived during a tumultuous period in Israel's history known as the Time of the Judges. This era followed the death of Joshua, the leader who had guided the Israelites into the Promised Land. After Joshua's passing, the Israelites repeatedly turned away from God, succumbing to cycles of sin, oppression, repentance, and deliverance. The nation lacked central leadership, and the tribes often acted independently, leaving them vulnerable to enemy attacks. During this chaotic time, the Israelites were oppressed by Jabin, the king of Canaan. Jabin's reign of terror lasted for 20 years, and his military power was formidable, especially because of his 900 iron chariots force that seemed invincible in ancient warfare. The Israelites, downtrodden and afraid, cried out to God for deliverance, longing for a leader who could guide them to freedom. Deborah, a woman of wisdom and authority. In this dark and uncertain time, God raised up Deborah as both a prophetess and a judge. The Bible describes her as a woman of profound wisdom and spiritual authority. She would sit under a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, where the Israelites came to her to settle disputes and seek guidance. Judges 4-5. Deborah's role as both a judge and a prophetess was unique and groundbreaking. As a judge, she provided leadership and justice in a society dominated by men. Her judgments were fair and wise, earning her the respect and trust of the people. As a prophetess, she communicated God's will to His people, offering divine insight and direction. Deborah's dual roles made her a trusted leader in both civil and spiritual matters. She stood as a testament to God's ability to raise up leaders regardless of gender or societal expectations. Her leadership was characterized by humility, wisdom, and a deep commitment to serving God and His people. In Judges 4-6-7, Deborah received a divine message from God and summoned Barak, a military leader from the tribe of Naphtali. She delivered God's command with clarity and authority. "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands." Despite the clarity of God's command, Barak hesitated. He was willing to go to battle only if Deborah went with him. His request revealed his lack of confidence, but it also underscored Deborah's leadership and the respect she commanded. Deborah agreed to go, but warned him, "Because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." Judges 4-9. This statement set the stage for one of the most unexpected twists in the story. While Deborah's prophecy initially seemed to imply that she would receive the honor, the fulfillment would come through another remarkable woman. Barak gathered 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun and led them to Mount Tabor, just as Deborah had instructed. Sisera, hearing of their movements, mobilized his army and chariots, confident in his overwhelming strength. Deborah gave Barak the signal to attack, saying, "Go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" Judges 4:14. Her words reflected her unwavering faith in God's promise and her ability to inspire courage in others. As Barak and his forces charged down Mount Tabor, God intervened in a miraculous way. Judges 5, known as the Song of Deborah, describes how the Lord caused a torrential rainstorm, turning the battlefield into a muddy quagmire. Sisera's iron chariots, once an unbeatable advantage, became useless in the mud, and his army was thrown into chaos. Barak's forces overwhelmed the Canaanite army, and not a single soldier was left alive. Sisera, seeing that the battle was lost, abandoned his chariot and fled on foot. He sought refuge in the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, a family that was on friendly terms with Jabin, the Canaanite king. Jael welcomed Sisera into her tent and offered him milk to drink, making him feel safe and secure. Exhausted from the battle, Sisera fell into a deep sleep. Then, in an act of boldness and cunning, Jael took a tent peg and hammer and drove the peg through his temple, killing him instantly. This act fulfilled Deborah's prophecy that Sisera would be delivered into the hands of a woman. When Barak arrived in pursuit of Sisera, Jael came out to meet him and showed him the lifeless body of the Canaanite commander. Through Jael's unexpected bravery, God completed the victory he had promised to Israel. In Judges 5, Deborah and Barak sang a song of praise to celebrate God's deliverance. The song is one of the oldest pieces of Hebrew poetry and recounts the events of the battle, emphasizing God's sovereignty and the courage of those who participated. The song praises God as the ultimate source of victory. When you, Lord, went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. Judges 5-4. It also honors those who willingly fought, including the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, and highlights Jael's role as the woman who delivered the final blow to Israel's oppressor. Deborah's song concludes with a prayer. So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength. Judges 5:31. The chapter ends with the note that the land had peace for 40 years, a testament to the lasting impact of Deborah's leadership. Deborah's story is rich, with lessons that continue to resonate with us today. God can use anyone. Deborah's story reminds us that God can raise up leaders regardless of gender, background, or societal expectations. Her faith and wisdom made her a powerful instrument of God's will. Faith inspires courage. Deborah's unwavering faith in God gave Barak and the Israelites the courage to face an enemy that seemed invincible. Her leadership demonstrates the importance of trusting God's promises. Obedience brings victory. Barak's initial hesitation showed the cost of doubt, but his eventual obedience led to victory. God's plans are fulfilled when his people act in faith and trust his guidance. God works through unexpected means. The victory over Sisera came not through military might, but through a sudden rainstorm and the bravery of a woman named Jael. This highlights God's ability to work through the unexpected to accomplish his purposes. The power of praise. Deborah's song of praise reminds us to give God the glory for every victory. Worship is not only a response to what God has done, but also a declaration of faith in his continued faithfulness. Deborah's legacy. Deborah's story is one of the most extraordinary accounts in Scripture. As a prophetess, judge, and leader, she played a pivotal role in delivering Israel from oppression and restoring peace to the land. Her wisdom, courage, and faith continue to inspire believers today, reminding us that God's plans are never limited by human expectations. Through her life, we see a powerful example of what it means to lead with faith, trust in God's promises, and celebrate his victories. Deborah's legacy is a testament to the enduring power of faith and the transformative impact of obedience. Her story encourages us to trust in God's faithfulness, lead with courage, and lift our voices in praise to the one who delivers and redeems. Abigail, the wise and courageous peacemaker. In the rugged hills of Carmel, a story of profound wisdom, remarkable courage, and divine intervention unfolds. It is a tale that highlights the power of a single individual to avert disaster and bring about peace through faith and discernment. The central figure in this narrative is Abigail, the wife of a wealthy but foolish man named Nabal. Her actions during a moment of intense crisis not only preserve the lives of many, but also reveal her deep faith in God's sovereignty and his plan for his people. Nabal, whose name fittingly means fool, was a man of great wealth. He owned thousands of sheep and goats, a testament to his material prosperity. However, his character was sorely lacking. Nabal was known for his harshness, arrogance, and reckless behavior. His selfishness and lack of discernment stood in stark contrast to the wisdom and grace of his wife Abigail. The story begins during the shearing season, a time of feasting and celebration in ancient Israel. It was a period when the hard work of tending flocks was rewarded and the abundance of the harvest was celebrated. During this time, David, the anointed future king of Israel, and his men were in the wilderness near Carmel. They had been protecting Nabal's shepherds and flocks from harm, offering an unspoken service of guardianship. David's men had acted as a protective shield, ensuring that Nabal's wealth was not plundered by bandits or wild animals. When the time of shearing came, a season of abundance and joy, David sent messengers to Nabal requesting provisions. His request was not a demand but a humble appeal made in a spirit of goodwill and mutual respect. David and his men had been a blessing to Nabal, and it was customary for those who benefited from such protection to offer some form of recompense. Nabal's response to David's request was anything but gracious. He dismissed David with scorn, saying, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse?" Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where? 1 Samuel 25 to 10:11. Nabal's words were not merely a refusal, they were a deliberate insult. He not only denied David's request, but also demeaned his character and standing. Nabal's arrogance and disdain were evident in his response, and his words were a direct affront to David, who had shown him nothing but kindness. This insult struck a nerve with David, who in his frustration and sense of betrayal vowed to take vengeance. Gathering 400 armed men, David set out to destroy Nabal and his household. His anger was justified given the circumstances, but it was a reaction that could have led to unnecessary bloodshed and tragedy. When Abigail heard what had happened, she acted swiftly and decisively. A servant informed her of Nabal's insult and the danger it had provoked. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Abigail wasted no time. She prepared a generous gift: 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, roasted grain, raisins, and fig sand, set out to meet David. Without telling her husband, she rode out on a donkey, intercepting David and his men as they approached. When Abigail saw David, she dismounted and bowed low to the ground, showing him the utmost respect. Her words were as humble as her posture, and her plea was masterfully crafted. Abigail took the blame upon herself, saying, "Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent." 1 Samuel 25-24-25. She acknowledged David's rightful grievance but appealed to his higher calling. Abigail reminded David of God's promise to make him a lasting dynasty and urged him not to tarnish his reputation by shedding innocent blood or taking revenge. Her words were both wise and prophetic, pointing to the hand of God in David's life. "The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live." 1 Samuel 25. Arshaba. Her speech had the desired effect. David was moved by her wisdom and recognized that God had sent her to prevent him from committing a grave sin. He praised Abigail, saying, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day." 1 Samuel 25-32-33. David accepted Abigail's gifts and turned back, sparing Nabal and his household from destruction. When Abigail returned home, she found Nabal feasting like a king, oblivious to the danger he had narrowly escaped. He was drunk, so Abigail wisely waited until morning to tell him what had happened. When she finally revealed how close he had come to ruin, Nabal's heart failed him and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. Nabal's death was a stark reminder of God's justice. His arrogance and folly had led to his downfall, while Abigail's wisdom had preserved her household. When David heard of Nabal's death, he sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. Abigail accepted, joining David's household and becoming a part of his journey to kingship. Her story stands as a testament to the power of wisdom, humility, and faith in God's plan. Abigail's life offers timeless lessons that resonate with us today. Wisdom in crisis. Abigail's ability to act quickly and wisely in a moment of crisis saved many lives. Her example reminds us of the importance of discernment and courage under pressure, humility and grace. Abigail approached David with humility, diffusing his anger with gentle and respectful words. Her approach demonstrates the power of humility in resolving conflict. Faith in God's sovereignty. Abigail trusted in God's plan for David and appealed to his higher calling, showing her own faith in God's promises. God's justice. Nabal's fate serves as a sobering reminder that arrogance and selfishness lead to destruction, while wisdom and faith are rewarded. Abigail's legacy. Abigail's story is more than a tale of conflict and resolution. It is a vivid portrayal of God's ability to work through individuals to bring about his purposes. In a world often marked by turmoil and strife, Abigail's example shines as a beacon of hope and encouragement. Her wisdom, courage, and faith continue to inspire those who seek to walk in God's ways. Her legacy is one of peace and reconciliation, a testament to the power of a woman who dared to act with wisdom and faith. Abigail's story reminds us that God can use anyone, regardless of their social standing or gender, to accomplish his divine will. Her life is a powerful example of the impact one person can have when they trust in God and act with courage and conviction. Mary and Martha, sisters of faith and witnesses of miracles. The story of Mary and Martha, two sisters from the humble village of Bethany, is a rich narrative of contrasts, faith, and the profound love of Jesus. Their lives are intricately woven into some of the most significant moments in the Gospels, offering us a glimpse into the Lord's teachings, his boundless compassion, and his miraculous power. These women were not just casual acquaintances of Jesus. They were devoted followers who opened their home to him and his disciples, and through their experiences, they bore witness to his ability to conquer even the most formidable enemy of Aldith itself. Mary and Martha lived in Bethany, a small village nestled just 2 miles from the bustling city of Jerusalem. Their home was a place of warmth and hospitality, a refuge where Jesus and his disciples often found rest and solace. The sisters shared their home with their brother Lazarus, and together the 3 siblings formed a close-knit family that had a deep and abiding relationship with Jesus. While the Bible portrays both Mary and Martha as devoted followers of Christ, their personalities and approaches to life were distinctly different. Martha was the industrious and practical one, always focused on the tasks at hand and ensuring that everything was in order. She was the embodiment of hospitality, tirelessly working to provide comfort and care to her guests. Mary, on the other hand, was contemplative and introspective. She was drawn to the deeper spiritual connection she felt in Jesus' presence, often choosing to sit at his feet and absorb his teachings. One of the most memorable encounters between Mary, Martha, and Jesus occurred during a visit to their home. As Jesus entered, Martha immediately sprang into action, bustling about to prepare a meal and ensure that everything was perfect for their esteemed guest. Her dedication to serving was evident in her every move. Mary, however, chose a different path. She sat at Jesus' feet, listening intently to his words, captivated by his teaching. Her focus was not on the physical needs of the moment, but on the spiritual nourishment that Jesus offered. Martha, overwhelmed by the demands of hosting, became frustrated. She approached Jesus, saying, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." Luke 10:40. Her words revealed not just her frustration, but her desire for recognition and assistance. Jesus responded with gentle wisdom. "Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." Luke 10:41-42. Jesus' reply was not a rebuke of Martha's service, but a reminder of priorities. He acknowledged her hard work and the value of her service, but emphasized that Mary had chosen the more important task, being present with him and receiving his words. In this moment, Jesus gently taught that while service is valuable, devotion and spiritual connection are paramount. He highlighted the importance of choosing the one thing that is truly necessary, the pursuit of a deeper relationship with God. The most poignant chapter in Mary and Martha's story begins with tragedy. Lazarus, their beloved brother, fell gravely ill. The sisters, desperate for their brother's healing, sent word to Jesus saying, "Lord, the one you love is sick." John 11:3. Their message carried both urgency and faith, as they believed that Jesus could heal their brother. However, Jesus did something unexpected. Instead of rushing to Bethany, he delayed for 2 days, saying, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." John 11:4. When Jesus finally decided to go to Bethany, Lazarus had already been dead for 4 days. As Jesus approached the village, Martha went out to meet him, while Mary stayed at home mourning. Martha's words were a mixture of grief and faith. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." John 11:21-22. Jesus replied with a profound statement of hope, "Your brother will rise again." John 11:23. While Martha understood this as a reference to the resurrection at the end of time, Jesus revealed a greater truth. "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die." Do you believe this? John 11:25-26. Martha responded with a confession of faith, saying, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." John 11:27. Meanwhile, Mary, still at home, was overcome with grief. When she heard that Jesus had arrived, she rushed to him and fell at his feet, weeping. Her words echoed her sisters. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." John 11:32. Seeing Mary's sorrow and the mourning of those around her, Jesus was deeply moved. The shortest and one of the most poignant verses in the Bible follows, "Jesus wept." John 11:35. His tears showed his compassion and his shared grief with those he loved. Jesus asked to be taken to Lazarus's tomb, a cave sealed with a stone. When he ordered the stone to be removed, Martha, ever practical, warned, "But Lord, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." John 11. 39. Jesus gently reminded her of his earlier promise. "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" John 11:40. The stone was rolled away, And Jesus looked up to heaven, praying, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." John 11:41-42. Then, with a loud voice, Jesus called out, "Lazarus, come out!" John 11:43. At his command, the man who had been dead for 4 days emerged, his hands and feet still wrapped in burial cloths. Jesus instructed the people to take off the grave clothes and let him go. The resurrection of Lazarus was not only a demonstration of Jesus' power over death, but also a foreshadowing of his own resurrection. For Mary and Martha, it was a moment that transformed their grief into joy and solidified their faith in Jesus as the Son of God. The lives of Mary and Martha offer valuable lessons for all believers. Balancing service and devotion. Martha's dedication to serving and Mary's focus on listening to Jesus highlight the need for balance. While acts of service are important, they should not overshadow our time spent in God's presence. Faith in the midst of grief. Both sisters expressed their faith in Jesus even in their grief, showing us the importance of trusting God's plan even when we don't understand it. The compassion of Christ. Jesus' tears at Lazarus' tomb reveal his deep compassion and his shared humanity. He understands our pain and walks with us in our sorrow. God's timing. Jesus' delay in coming to Bethany was not a denial of their request, but a divine plan to reveal God's glory. Trusting in God's timing is essential, even when it feels delayed. The power of the resurrection. The story of Lazarus points to the ultimate hope of all believers, that Jesus is the resurrection and the life. A legacy of faith. Mary and Martha's story is a reminder of the deep personal relationship Jesus offers to those who follow him. Their lives were forever changed by their encounters with Christ, and through them we see both the humanity and divinity of Jesus. Whether we are serving like Martha or sitting at his feet like Mary, we are invited into a relationship with the one who has power over life and death, and who offers us eternal hope. Their story encourages us to embrace the balance of service and devotion, to trust in God's plan even in the midst of grief, and to find comfort in the compassion of Christ. Mary and Martha's legacy is one of faith, hope, and the enduring love of God, reminding us that in all circumstances Jesus is the source of our strength and our salvation. The hemorrhaging woman. A story of faith and healing. The story of the hemorrhaging woman, as told in the Gospels of Mark and Luke, is a powerful narrative of desperation, faith, and the compassionate power of Jesus. Her encounter with him is brief yet profoundly transformative, offering a glimpse into the immense love and healing power of God for those who seek him with unwavering faith. This account has been a source of hope and inspiration for countless believers throughout the ages, reminding us that no matter how hopeless our situation may seem, Jesus is able to restore us completely. The woman's story begins with a condition that had plagued her for 12 long years. She suffered from a continuous bleeding disorder, a condition that not only took a severe toll on her physical health, but also left her socially and spiritually isolated. According to Jewish law, her condition rendered her ceremonially unclean, Leviticus 15:25-27. This meant she was barred from participating in religious activities and was unable to have normal interactions with others, as anyone she touched would also become unclean. Her condition had become a source of profound suffering. The Gospel of Mark tells us she had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. Mark 5:26. This woman had exhausted every possible resource. She had spent her savings and endured countless treatments, none of which had brought her relief. Her suffering was not just physical, it was emotional, social, and spiritual. By the time we meet her in the Gospels, she is at the end of her rope. Her life had been defined by pain, isolation, and a seemingly endless cycle of despair. Yet, it is precisely at this moment of utter desperation that her faith ignites and her story takes a miraculous turn. Hearing about Jesus. Word about Jesus had spread far and wide. People spoke of his miracle show. He healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, and even raised the dead. For the hemorrhaging woman, these stories must have sparked a glimmer of hope. Could this man Jesus be the answer to her years of pain and isolation? She decided to take a bold step. Despite her status as an outcast, she resolved to seek Jesus. She believed deep in her heart that if she could only touch his garment, she would be healed. It was a daring decision. To venture into a crowd meant risking the shame and rebuke of others if her condition was discovered. But her faith was greater than her fear. The day she approached Jesus, he was surrounded by a large crowd. Luke describes the scene vividly, saying, "As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him." Luke 8:42. People pressed in from all sides, eager to see him, hear him, and perhaps receive a miracle of their own. Amid the throng, the hemorrhaging woman made her way toward Jesus. She must have moved quietly, cautiously, not wanting to draw attention to herself. As she approached, her heart must have raced with anticipation. Finally, she reached out and touched the edge of his cloak. Immediately, she felt something change. The bleeding stopped, and she knew in her body that she was healed. After 12 years of suffering, her nightmare was over in an instant. The power of Jesus had restored her completely. "Who touched me?" Though the woman intended to slip away unnoticed, Jesus stopped. He turned and asked, "Who touched me?" Luke 8:45. His disciples, puzzled by the question, pointed out the obvious. You see the people crowding against you, and yet you can ask, "Who touched me?" Mark 5:31. But Jesus wasn't asking about the jostling of the crowd. He was asking about the touch of faith. He knew that power had gone out from him, and he was determined to identify the one who had been healed. Realizing she couldn't remain hidden, the woman came forward. Trembling with fear, she fell at Jesus' feet and confessed everything. She told him about her illness, her years of suffering, and her belief that touching his garment would heal her. Jesus' response to the woman was filled with compassion and affirmation. He said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Mark 5:34. By calling her daughter, Jesus spoke directly to her heart. It was a term of endearment and inclusion, restoring her dignity and affirming her as a beloved child of God. In that moment, Jesus not only healed her body, but also her spirit. He publicly acknowledged her faith, erasing the shame and isolation she had endured for so long. The story of the hemorrhaging woman teaches us profound lessons about faith, courage, and the nature of Jesus' power. Faith that acts. The woman's faith was not passive, it moved her to action. Despite her fear and the obstacles in her path, she reached out to Jesus, believing in his ability to heal her. Her story challenges us to take bold steps of faith, trusting in God's power to meet our needs. Jesus' accessibility. The woman's healing shows that Jesus is accessible to all, regardless of status or circumstance. She didn't have to make an elaborate request or follow a ritual. A simple touch of faith was enough to receive his power. Personal connection. Though surrounded by a crowd, Jesus focused on one individual. He wasn't content to let her slip away unnoticed. This highlights the personal nature of his love and care. He sees each of us, knows our needs, and desires a relationship with us. Complete restoration. Jesus didn't just heal the woman physically, he restored her emotionally and socially as well. By addressing her publicly, he erased the stigma she carried and affirmed her place in the community. Faith overcomes fear. The woman's faith enabled her to overcome the fear of rejection and humiliation. Her story encourages us to trust in God even when circumstances seem hopeless. The hemorrhaging woman's story has resonated with believers throughout history. Her faith, though simple and quiet, was powerful enough to draw healing from the Son of God. Her courage to reach out in the midst of her pain serves as an example to all who face trials and challenges. Her story also reminds us that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. The same compassion and power that healed her are available to us. Whether we are struggling with physical illness, emotional pain, or spiritual longing, we can come to him in faith, knowing that he hears us and is able to restore us completely. In the end, the hemorrhaging woman's encounter with Jesus was more than just a moment of healing, it was a moment of transformation. Her life, once marked by suffering and isolation, became a testimony to the love and power of the Savior. Through her story, we are reminded that no matter how long we've been hurting or how impossible our situation may seem, one touch of faith can change everything. The Bible is filled with stories of amazing women. Today we would hear the stories of some of them. Welcome. If you are new, subscribe to the channel and comment where you are watching from. Thanks. These are some of the story of the women of the Bible, expressing their faith, courage, and attributes. Hope you enjoyed the stories. We wish you a good night's sleep. Save this story to play back later. Subscribe and like the video to support me. God bless you.